I want to turn it over to Ramya. Once again, I always mention that it is thanks to our wonderful partnership with the Key Biscayne Community Foundation that we're able to offer such amazing programs.
Thank you all for coming out. It's so nice to see such a huge crowd today. Roxy mentioned to me that there was a lot of excitement about hearing about the Galapagos, so if you guys have any other ideas about places that you'd like to hear about, let me know and I'll see what I can do. For those of you that don't know, my name is Ramya. I'm the Director of Environmental Science for the Key Biscayne Community Foundation, and we do these lectures once a month, and it's just anything, environment or science related. Last month we did space. So we've done turtles, we do all kinds of stuff. So any ideas you have that you're interested in, any places you want to hear about the biology of those areas or anything like that, just let me know. I'm always looking for ideas. Today we have with us Julianne Favale. She is a graduate student at the Rosenstiel School right next door, and she recently came back from a trip to the Galapagos, and she is going to tell you guys all about it. Julie.
Hi everyone. So again, my name is Julianne. I'm a master's student right over the bridge on Virginia Key. And for a class trip, we actually got to go to the Galapagos in Ecuador. So I'm going to be speaking a little bit about that today. Just a little bit of background about me. I grew up in Connecticut, small town, went to school in Rhode Island, never really moved around much, and then took the jump, came to Miami for graduate school, and here I am. Got connected with Key Biscayne Community Foundation through a program that I run at school where we give lectures to local high schools, middle schools, nature centers, community centers, and things of that nature. So that's how I ended up here. And my focuses are mainly for outreach, working on conservation efforts, making science accessible to all, because that's very important, especially with our generation. So what we're going to talk about today is what was this trip for, what is the Galapagos Islands, ecotourism, discussing what that means, the importance of sustainable agriculture, which sounds boring, but it was actually pretty cool, and marine conservation moving forward, what we're working on, what we learned, what we're going to bring back to the U.S. and help implement into our work. So basically, we traveled through this company that works with Miami called IOI. So the person who founded this company was actually a graduate from my program. And so his mission was to create a platform in the Galapagos where he can bring students and bring them around and show them cool areas of the Galapagos and how we conserve those areas. So our main missions for the trip was to bring ideas to the U.S., continuing conservation efforts, understanding the role of ecotourism, like why we travel there, the benefits, the cons of people who travel there, and the impact that it makes on local communities. We also are exploring new changes being conducted to fight the battle of carbon footprints, climate change, things like that that are affecting the Galapagos, but it's also affecting right here in Miami. So you got to take part in some cool activities that I'll go through, like scuba diving, snorkeling, hiking through national parks, and everything in between. And the big question that our professor told us we had to answer at the end, he told us on the plane, and then he asked us again as our final exam. He asked us, did we have a net positive or net negative effect visiting the Galapagos Islands? Was it worth it? Us going, spending all the money, the airplane fees, the carbon footprint. Did we get enough out of the trip to make this worth it? So something to keep in mind as we go through. So where's the Galapagos Islands? It's part of Ecuador, which is right about on the equator, and we went for 2 weeks. So before this, I took a class in the fall, around September, about the ecology, management, and biology of the Galapagos Islands. So we're going into this trip with a little bit of knowledge, some background, some tactics that they're using, and then come January, right after New Year's, we took a plane, and we were off. Started in Ecuador, in Quito, which is the capital, and then we took many boats, lots of boat rides, lots of hours, lots of sleeping on boats, and we took it over to the Galapagos Islands. Our stay was on Isabella, this big island that's kind of shaped like a seahorse, but first you land in Santa Cruz, one of the smaller islands, but the rest of our trip was in Isabella. So something to keep in mind, why this is such an important place. It is right on the equator, right? It's pretty different. It's very secluded. It's really, really far off from the mainland, which makes the animals there very, very unique and different than the sea turtles we have here in Miami. So what is it? Charles Darwin, I don't know if that rings a bell to anybody, but he actually founded the Galápagos Islands, and it began his theory on evolution, because there are some animals there that aren't found anywhere else, such as warm water penguins. Kind of crazy, kind of different than what you think about when you think of penguins, right? So it's diverse in endemic species, which means they're only found in that location, like the penguins, the Darwin finches, which are a type of bird, the Galapagos sea lion, the blue-footed boobies, and many, many more. This is an example of those. They also have red-footed and black-footed. And they're pretty cool to watch interact and see like flying around near the shore, just bright blue feet. Pretty awesome. And it also is now becoming a tourism hotspot. So it's not just researchers like us going there and checking out the environment and bringing ideas back. It's also like normal travelers, families, groups. A lot of people from Europe travel there as well. So it's kind of important to keep in mind, how is this affecting the ecosystem? All these people flying in, right? So again, it's pretty far off, which makes it super unique. These penguins actually were brought in by a giant current a long time ago. And through that current, they were able to adapt to this specific temperature and lost a lot of body fat. They're much thinner than other penguins in other parts of the world to adjust to the climate. And ever since then, they've been thriving in that location, which is pretty cool. So this is just a little history on the numbers of visitors, right? So 1990s, you're only looking at about 40,000 people a year. Pretty low numbers. Skyrockets 2018, 276,000 visitors. Yeah, pretty big peak. This is when new research papers started coming out. New research was being able to be conducted because new technology was arising. So a lot of people, a lot of researchers, but also a lot of general public started coming to this area. 2020, 72K, big drop, COVID, right? It gave the environment a little bit of time to relax. Then again, 2023, boom, we're right back up. 329,000 visitors to just the Galápagos Islands. Not Ecuador, just the islands, which puts a lot of pressure on the environment. So yeah, the growth in tourism and population also simulates secondary impacts. So it's not just the plane landing, but all the carbon emissions that come from those planes, all the food they have to import, right, on all those cargo ships. Migration, invasive species, every plane, every ship that comes in, there's a chance of bringing a new species that's going to hurt the species that are already present on the island. So these are just some of the effects that happen when we have such rise in numbers of visitors to this area. So then becomes this push and pull, right? So basically, the Ecuadorian government is seeing all these visitors rising. Right now, I guarantee you it's over 400,000 by now. Right, look at the numbers. So there's this push and pull. Ecuador wants to take advantage of these visitors, right? You want to make some profit, right? So what does this do? All the local communities, all the people that currently live there are now going to be affected by all of these visitors and these new rules that the government is trying to push on them. So there's a push for tourists. There's a push for the cruise industry, like Disney Cruise Lines. What about if we make a stop in the Galapagos, right? A push for governmental control. All those mom and pop shops that used to make money, right? Now they're gonna maybe start getting taxed because there's no tax there, which is pretty cool. Overexploitation of resources. All those protected areas slowly needs to be starting to be built on, right? To host hotels, visitors, and start getting, their rules get changed to the general public can have access. Then there's the pull from the locals. We wanna stay small. We don't want to be profiting off of tourists. We want to stay fishing. They were doing just fine fishing for years and years and years to make their money. Farmer-driven profit. This was a big push that we talked about in class, was how much the people did not want to change this tourism market. They were doing just fine. You know, Again, also, the education system is not very big in the Galapagos Islands. There's not really any colleges that they go to unless they go back to Ecuador, which usually is out of range for a lot of people and their money there. So now the big government is saying, you have to start learning English. All these tourists are coming in. You have to take a class, right? You can't have a bunch of tourists come in and nobody can speak a lick of English. So again, there's this push and pull, and this is still happening today. And people are going to travel no matter what. You can put regulations. You can say it's only for this. Okay, then I'm going to hop over to the next island. Right? It's going to happen no matter what. So how can we do it in a way that's going to benefit the people and benefit the environment? And that's the difference between ecotourism and tourism. Tourism's run-of-the-mill Disney cruise lines. You're usually there for pleasure, going to Sandals Resort, right? To have a martini on the beach with your friends. It's a little bit different when we want to make a positive impact. Instead of a large carbon footprint, think of all the carbon that's going to the environment when we have planes on planes on planes coming into the Galápagos Islands. It can't really withstand that. Animals can't withstand that. So what did we do? Our class trip, we made it ecotourism based, where we had responsible travel to natural areas that conserve the environment. We included education aspects. We involved interpretation. We didn't just show up to sites, but we were able to make our own opinions based on knowledge that we got from locals. And it sustains the well-being of the local people. We benefited the mom and pop shops by visiting. You know, we shopped small, we shopped local, and that's the most important part when you're traveling. So you're just a little group of students trying to make an impact, a positive impact in the Galapagos. We had no idea what really to expect once we got there, but it was pretty cool. First thing was we visited a lot of national park areas. Through this, we were able to talk to the tour guides and learn about the environment, but also learn a little bit of inside scoop as to about the area and how they grew up. This was a sulfur mine. This hike took, I think it was about like 7 miles. And all of us hiked up. This is a big little thing of boulders that we're hanging out on, throwing up the Miami symbol. This is an example of sulfur, and if you know the smell of it, it is very strong. It smells. But it was really, really awesome to see, and it's not pictured here, but there was this big like gas coming out of the top of it. It looked like a volcano. It was really beautiful. But the best part for me was seeing my classmate, who is a geophysics major. She loves geology. She was able to take this information and give it to her professor, talk to her professor back in Miami, and use it for research. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Another cool thing was our tour guide. After we went on this tour, we got so close with our tour guide. He was just a regular citizen in the Galapagos. And then he said, well, I do have a restaurant on the beach. Do you want to see where we grow our crops? So what did we do? We hopped in a van, just us students and our professor, and we went to his house. We got to see all the plantains he grew straight out of his garden, pineapple, sugarcane, you name it. And he gave us a whole display of a bunch of foods to try. And that's what meant the most on this trip, were those types of interactions. Another thing we did, we hiked a volcano, Sierra Negra. That was a 10-mile hike. Rainiest day I've experienced in a long time. We had ponchos, thank goodness, from our tour guide. This was beautiful as well. It's one of around 7 volcanoes throughout the Galápagos Islands. But again, we're just staying right here on Isabella, so we were able to see one volcano. It was beautiful. Again, there was a bunch of big pits like that, and just beautiful, beautiful colors that you can't even imagine here in Miami. Again, our tour guide was wonderful, spoke English and Spanish, but we tried our best to speak in Spanish to make them more comfortable, and it was a great experience. We also knew that because we're traveling, right, we want to give to those mom and pop shops. If there's going to be tourism, people aren't going to stop traveling. At least let's make it beneficial to the people who live there and house us as well. So we did some excursions. We went scuba diving. We saw manta rays, hammerhead sharks, sea turtles, sea horses, so many beautiful, beautiful creatures that you don't see a lot back here. White tip reef sharks. I'm a big shark person, so this was amazing. But yeah, so we were renting gear from these little mom and pop shops to go on these excursions. All the people who worked on the boat, they were still in college or just graduated, trying to make a little bit of cash. And that's what's important about shopping small and making sure we're giving back to the community there. Sure, we could have brought our own swimming fins, our own goggles, our own snorkeling gear, but we wanted to go and make sure we're benefiting the people there. Also, we rented some bikes. We went for like a 6-mile bike ride one day. We saw the Wall of Tears, which was a pretty cool site, which they built during World War I. So again, we shopped for bikes right there at the island. We rented our equipment that's me with some sea lions, for snorkeling. And they also had surfboards that you can rent, take out. And everywhere you go on the street now, this is a little bit of, you can make your own opinion about how you feel about this. But because tourism is getting so big, you walk the streets now, it's a lot of touristy spots. So you can do your laundry at one spot, you could do bike rentals at one, you can rent a camera for snorkeling at another. So it's just, they really, really are starting to emphasize and make profit off of tourism. So at least it's in a more sustainable way with smaller businesses. This is my favorite part, the food. You don't get food like this in Miami. It is so fresh. My mouth just waters thinking about it. They have white pineapple, which was really cool, where they have a whole yellow pineapple with no core. No core, you can just cut into it and just start chewing at it. It's amazing. But this is just some examples of the type of foods that we got to eat there. This is a more traditional meal that we would have, probably about, twice a day. Papas fritas, some octopus or chicken, some lettuce with a tomato on top, and some rice. Pretty simple, pretty good. It doesn't get much fresher than that. With our company that we went through, IOI, that I mentioned earlier, we each got a little ID card. So we got to show up to the restaurant. We felt pretty cool. We felt like VIP members. We got to give them the ID card, and then they would give us a meal. And these are about what they looked like. But a lot of times with tourist industries, they want to market to the public as well. So my friend Flora found a little supermarket and found some peanut M&Ms. So again, they're balancing, right? They're getting their local foods out, but they're gonna have the peanut M&Ms, some Skittles, some Gatorade. Because again, America and Europe are usually their biggest profiters for travel. And that's just a little look at us eating. All the restaurants are outdoors. It's beautiful. There's not a lot of rainfall. Again, we're on the equator. It's always warm out. So yeah, and they're always on island time. You cannot be in a rush. But it's so worth it when you see behind the counter, it's a mom and a grandmother and a child learning how to cook together. Everything's done in front of you. You can see the connections happening. And that's why it meant so much to eat at these mom and pop restaurants. It was made with love. You can really tell. And of course, we're there for school, right? We're having this fun, we're going on our excursions, but at the end of the day, we're also there for school. So we had our meetings, about a lecture once a day, early in the morning, before we went on hikes, before we went to the beach or scuba diving, we would have a lecture. So it was held in that small building up there, but it was probably about the size of this room. And we would have class, just checking in with each other, making sure everyone's doing okay, because some people would get sick here and there. Traveling, it does that to you. But also we learned about how we can benefit the activity that we do the next day. So say we were going on the hike on the volcanoes, how can we make sure we're being careful and respectful with the tour guide and the environment while we're there? Also, anywhere that we went, both in English and Spanish, so anywhere that we went, we would stop and read the sign, learn about the area, so kind of like a passive education aspect. Also, there's me up there before my scuba dive, and this is like learning education on the go. So right before the scuba dive, our instructor would say, all right, this is the sign for hammerheads, this is the sign for shark, or just go like this and we'll know to turn around and get the heck out of there. Sea turtle, manta ray, things like that that I don't learn in class here, right? You don't learn that walking down the streets of Miami. So it's cool to learn from the locals different signals that I would have never otherwise known, and now I'll remember them forever. Also, we went to a coffee shop, but it's also a coffee farm. Only 2 on the island. So if you need a Dunkin' Donuts coffee, it's not gonna happen. So what we did, we went to this farm and we literally did the process beginning to end of making coffee. We walked through the trail with the owner, picked coffee beans right off the trees, brought them back, crushed them up because they had a little shell on them, roasted them over the fire, just like that. That was the owner. And then we grinded them up and brought coffee home that day. My parents were very happy. That was their souvenir. They were very excited. But yeah, again, like learning on the go. Anywhere we went, the sulfur mines, the volcano, there was something for everybody to learn. All right, and also sustainable agriculture. Basically, we want to make sure that we're being responsible with how we put carbon back in the soil. So all those people traveling, everything we do has a carbon emission. We're releasing carbon, but we need somewhere to store it because we can't have too much carbon going on. So what we did, we went to one of IOI's, the companies, they created a greenhouse farm where they both conduct research and replant a ton of plants. And this is all just nonprofit work. This is a little bit of a look at the coffee farm again, right? We want to shop locally. That's us organizing. If they were too red, we take them out. They have to be just the right color. That was my job. I can visualize it in my head. And then also we went to a giant, there was a restaurant, and the owner of the restaurant started as a farm. And then during COVID, that owner created the restaurant for locals to come to and eat, so they felt like they had somewhere to go during the day. So we went to the farm, looked at so many amazing plants. The smells are so fresh. The peppers, I'm Italian, amazing. But no, it's beautiful work, and resulting carbon-enriched soils increase microbial diversity, higher yields, it reduces input requirements. Basically, it's really good for the environment, right? So taking like the time and going to these places, seeing their work, I might even go there and visit again just to help out. And of course, it's a hotspot for tourists. These are all pictures. Everything I've shown so far are pictures that I've taken or my professor has taken on our trip, which is pretty amazing. Here's my friend Flora with the giant tortoise. Usually you're not supposed to get that close, but it literally walked right up to her. It was amazing. We were like on the trail getting back from a hike, and it just slowly started walking out of the woods and through the trail and walked right back up to her. She started crying, of course. It was beautiful. You can't, like, you had to be there, you know? So it was beautiful. That's us with some sea turtles. We went snorkeling every single day in our free time because everything's open access there. If it's not in a protected area, you can walk to the beach in 5 minutes. So we really took advantage of that. There's the penguins. They also go in the water and swim around with you. There's a baby sea lion. That one was only, I think they said 2 weeks old. Yeah, a week or 2 weeks old. So cute. Sea lions will go in the water with you, blow bubbles at you while you're snorkeling. It is so funny. It's a little bit scary at first, but you get used to it. But it is the coolest thing. There's also flamingos, kind of different, but they're actually not genetically that different than the flamingos we have in Florida, which I find pretty interesting because this is pretty far away. So that was pretty cool as well. With this, right, we love these species. They're beautiful. They're all from the Galápagos. You can't find this tortoise type anywhere else in the world. But with tourists coming, dun dun dun, invasive species. All right, there's a big peak here. So this is showing the amount of invasive species that are coming to the Galápagos throughout the years. 1500s we're at 0, right? 1800s we're starting to rise, skyrocket. The planes, the boats, the cruise lines, the people, right? Even little bugs that come over can have a huge, huge impact on the environment. Yeah, so this is just new introduced species that we're aware of coming to the Galapagos and affecting the environment. So, what does this all mean? This looks complicated. Stay with me. All right? Basically, there's still this push and pull. There's still this conflict. Scientific research, conserve the environment, but we want to make money, right? All these different variables that are all happening right now. So, my professor, the one who works in the Galapagos, who graduated from this program, this was his thesis. He did his whole master's project when he went to the Galapagos and did studies himself. He found out we need something that's hybrid. We can't tell nobody to come, right? What about all the research that we need to do, right? If we want to conserve this, people got to go there. But we want to also give to the mom and pop shops. So how do we create this balance? And what it comes down to is working small, right? Working with NGOs, working with nonprofits to create a balance, giving the people on the island a voice, but also meeting the requirements that Ecuador has. So, lobbying, working with NGOs, there's going to be human development, right? So, we also want to conserve. So, it's a lot of push and pull, making sure everybody feels heard and listened to, but we do have to hit some guidelines. All right, how does this relate to Miami? Bring it home, Julianne, bring it home, right? Stay informed, all right? Take part in the nonprofit work that's being done right here in Key Biscayne, all right? Stay up to date with all the news that's happening that is just passing right now. There's a lot of bills that are going through right now as we speak this week, right? Staying informed. National parks, right? Being respectful while we go there. Asking questions to the different people who work there. They have a lot more to say than what's on the script that they have to give you. You know, just staying informed, asking those questions. Why not? Coconut Grove Farmers Market, that's my favorite spot on the weekends, right? Local shopping, right? It's a great way to give to those mom and pop shops, just like the ones that I saw with the mother and grandmother and daughter cooking together. These farms are so important to us that we should be giving back to them a little bit, right? And again, just staying up to date, looking at different work that's being done around us, and that's my best piece of advice, is just staying informed, respect the environment. That's all I got. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I'm more than happy to answer. Yeah.
What's the option of the Galápagos Islands?
I'm not too sure what it is, to be honest, but I would say like around 30,000 people. 30,000. All the islands. We stayed only in this bottom portion. And from what we saw, after a mile up, that's all there was. And you also can't build anymore on there.
National parks?
No, so usually it's about like 3/4, I believe, is national park. So a lot of it is protected right now, but with all the tourists coming in, it becomes difficult. But there's only like people building up till about this waypoint, halfway. The rest is protected, volcanoes, national parks, things like that. So think of it as like just Key Biscayne.
I was there and I didn't see any, where we went, there weren't any people.
Yeah.
It was just the tour.
Yep.
And it was totally amazing. I loved everything.
That's amazing.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Yes, we're all aware of the problems in the Sargasso Sea here in the Atlantic. Is anything similar to that? I know in the Pacific they have even a bigger problem than the Sargasso Sea has, but is that affecting the Galápagos Islands also?
Okay. Her question was about there's issues happening in the Sargasso Sea right now, and if there's anything kind of similar happening closer to the Galápagos Islands that I'm aware of. I'm not super aware of it. We didn't really touch on it too much in class, But I wouldn't be surprised if that's still,
It's got a bigger waste
yeah,
in the Pacific Ocean than than here in the
yeah.
Sargasso Sea. That's
Yeah.
what-
Yeah.
So I also don't know specifically if there's an issue with like sargassum in the Galapagos, but because the Sargasso Sea is in the Atlantic, the majority of the sargassum issue that we keep running into and that, you know, is in the Caribbean is because of what's happening in the Atlantic, and that doesn't really get all the way around into the Pacific. Now there probably is sargassum or something similar there, but I don't know that they're having the same problems because our sargassum in the Atlantic is growing out of control because of the amount of runoff and like fertilizer and things like that like from a lot of it is actually from the Amazon because they're logging trees, so a lot of the nutrients from the soil, because the trees are no longer there to hold the soil in place, that's being washed into the Amazon, and then there's fertilizers and all kinds of things that's getting out into the Atlantic and causing a huge boom in sargassum. It's part of the reason, not the entire reason. Some of it's climate change and other things, but that's why we have it so bad here. And you don't necessarily have that kind of similar thing going on in, you don't have a huge river like that has so much water and nutrients being, washed into the Pacific, but also because the Pacific is so much larger. So if it would be along a coastline somewhere and not necessarily, like it is in the Atlantic, kind of everywhere.
But in the Pacific, I think it's spreading out so much that it doesn't seem like a problem.
No, I'm not saying it's not a problem. It's definitely a problem everywhere, but you don't, I'm just talking specifically about the nutrient problem that you get in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico is much worse here than what you see in the Pacific. But the Pacific, I'm sure you've heard of the Pacific, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And there's actually two of them, and it's because the ocean currents create a huge gyre in the North Hemisphere and the South Hemisphere. And that just basically, it's like a really slow swirl in the water, and so all of this trash that gets out there and floats just ends up in this huge, and it's not like an island, right? It's all spread out over hundreds of miles, but it's just, you can't go through that area without seeing the trash. So it is definitely a problem in the Pacific also.
What's being done for that?
There's all kinds of initiatives, but it's a very difficult problem because of the expanse. Sorry.
Thank you for an excellent presentation.
Of
You're a
course.
really great representative of the Rosenstiel School.
Thank you.
My question has to do with funding. I just read that Columbia and Brown have eliminated positions that are only research related and only their employees who teach because of the federal funding problem. What can you tell us about what's going on with respect to cutting off all the funding for the very important research that you're doing?
That is a great question and very relevant right now, especially while I'm in the internship search and diving into the job fields for sure. I know right now that I've heard a lot of rumors about different people being cut from positions, not at Rosenstiel. They're very proud of their staff and they don't want to fall into that at all. And I'm very proud of them and to be a part of a school that's like that. NOAA, on the other hand, I know is having difficulty across the street, trying to keep positions available and to the staff, but I have heard of some cuts as well. So yeah, it's a difficult time for sure. But again, we're just gonna play the waiting game, send some prayers up, and hopefully everything turns out okay.
Just a quick question. While you were there, what was your favorite animal encounter?
That was a great question. There were a lot. Gosh, I would say favorite of the favorites. I would say a manta ray. We were scuba diving. We were down there for about an hour, and we were pretty deep. And then we were on our ascent. We were heading back up, just normal routine, going up slow, no problem. And then our scuba instructor just went, and we were like, "What? Are you supposed to go up faster? What do you want me to do?" And I look up, from here to the ceiling, giant manta ray, goes right by, size of a boat. Yeah, it was nothing else I've ever seen. They're so majestic, and you could just the water was quiet, and then I look around and everyone's just staring, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's a marine biologist's dream, That was probably one of my favorites. The sea lions in the water, that was amazing as well. But also just anywhere you walk, we were on the beach just on our day off after scuba diving, chilling on the beach because you can't really go swimming after you scuba dive because of the nitrogen levels. So we were just chilling on the beach, hanging out. And then you look over at the trees and there's a bench that says like Isabella on it for like tourists to take pictures on. And there's a sea lion asleep on the bench with like a bunch of like beach balls and designs around it. And it's just completely asleep. And there's like a puppy sea lion underneath. It was adorable. So just be able to look at everything with like that was awesome. We also went to like a tortoise or like a turtle hatchery that they have there where they nurse and like from when they're eggs to fully grown tortoises. So we were able to go there and see a bunch of baby tortoises and it was adorable. And they don't do any like research on them. They just keep counts on them and then release them when they're at good health. And they also rehabilitate them as well. So like any turtles that we saw, like that one, you can't really see, but on the back of those, they have numbers on them. So you know that they were released from the nursery, which is pretty cool to know that the numbers are starting to go up and progress is being made. So those are my top 3.
Are the islands UNESCO World Heritage?
I believe so, yeah. If all the islands were UNESCO, they are, but right now, I remember, so every individual island has like one representative, but the turnover for the representatives are once a year, which is kind of interesting. It's like a governor for each individual island. Like our IOI, who we stayed with, it was like this girl's dad, and then the next year it got turned over to someone else. So there's a lot of like policy too that's constantly being changed, which kind of makes it also more difficult to keep regulations up. But that's all I really know about like that realm. I don't know a whole lot. Yeah.
Do you or Rum, can you reject UNESCO if you don't want to be a part of it and have those restrictions?
He asked if you can reject UNESCO if you don't want restrictions. I'm not sure. We'll look it up.
Galapagos is UNESCO World Heritage.
And Galapagos is. Any other questions? Yeah.
I actually took a trip to the Galápagos with my whole family. There were 18 of us from ages 6 to about 17. But when we did it, we were on a cruise ship. So we went to the different islands. I haven't heard you say it. It was like so interesting that each island would have a whole species that you don't see on the other islands. Did you find that?
So we weren't super lucky enough to go to the other islands. We were only on Isabella, so I'm really only aware of the concentrated species on that specific island. But we did go into Santa Cruz when we first got there, and then took a boat over. But some species are strictly for those islands. Some species are more like highly populated at some as well. I know on, which one is it? Where's Fernandina or Floriana? Both of these smaller ones, there's a lot of red-footed boobies that you don't really find on other islands. So there were a lot of blue-footed where we were, but we didn't get to see any red-footed. So kind of interesting. And I mean, they are closer together, so you think maybe there would be some migration, but if they're at home, they don't want to move, they're sitting happy.
If a site is nominated for a UNESCO World Heritage Site, they can refuse it if they want to, or they can withdraw the nomination. Once it's selected, they can't undo it unless they stop taking care of the site and it degrades. Then it can be removed from the World Heritage Site as a World Heritage Site. But otherwise, once it's decided that it's a World Heritage Site, it stays that way as long as they're taking care of it. My question is, I just recently actually came back from Hawaii and was really excited to find out that they have a plastic bag ban. Do you know, is there anything like that? They have a whole bunch of really, really good environmental laws there. Do they have things like that in the Galapagos to make sure that it stays,
Eco-friendly,
pristine or as pristine as they can keep it?
Yeah, so for example, water bottles can't be plastic. They only have canned Coke or canned Pepsi, whatever it may be. They actually have a pretty good system going for that. They have, if you buy a can of Coke, it's $2. You go back, return it, you get $1 back. Right, so they have little initiatives that are starting to come out. It's more as of late. It's not like super developed, but there are still like plastic bags there from the different like gift shops and things like that. But they're starting to think with the initiatives. There's no like plastic or anything allowed on the beaches, of course. A lot of it is protected as well. When you go into a national park, you have to stop at a front desk and they kind of get a visual. You have any supplies? You gotta go litter, you know, and they will stop you. And be like, you shouldn't be bringing that onto the beach. So they're allowed to turn you away as well, which I think is actually a great initiative. But besides that, I didn't experience any crazy rule following or good things that are happening like that, any initiatives. But they are starting to implement the glassware, which is definitely really helpful. So what do they do with the trash? That's a great question. A lot of it is exported off the island. Yeah, so those big cargo ships that are coming in, dropping off a lot of supplies, right? Cans for food, things like that. Old towels that we use at hotels, they all get exported off the island afterwards. The only problem is there's only about one like ship of cargo that comes in once a month. So say you need, I don't know, a hairbrush. So you forgot your toothbrush on your vacation. And there's only 2 big markets. If they don't have a toothbrush, your 3-week stay, you're gonna have some stinky teeth. Alright, so that's another thing. It's like with a lot of income, a lot of end product happening on the island, it also takes a while to get it off. So that's definitely something that I experienced when I had to go to the store and they didn't have any supplies that I needed. But yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind if you're ever traveling to the Galapagos. Remember your nail clippers, nail files, all that stuff. You're saying like if someone's visiting Miami, if they can see ecotourism things. Not that probably just online. He was asking if someone's coming into Miami, if there's different ways to access information about like ecotourism or things I showed on the last slide. But for me, I just Googled it. But I mean, just staying informed. KBCF does some great work. But yeah, what I did before going to Galapagos is seeing if there were initiatives like this. There's not a whole lot, just IOI, which was based only on Isabella. So again, it's kind of interesting to keep in mind that only the big island that we were on has ecotourism options. If you're traveling to other islands, there's not like an institute that's bringing students to do it responsibly. So this is strictly just on one of the islands that they have. What kind of bugs do they have? Not a lot of bugs, actually, which is really nice. But a lot of scorpions. Yeah, that was interesting. I didn't see any snakes, but I know they have them. What are those, like a stink bug? They had a lot of those, found some of those in the hotel, but you deal with it. But not a lot of flies, not a whole lot of mosquitoes that I experienced. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, there's not a lot of species in general, so I don't know the exact count, but I know it's not nearly as much as here in the US. But I found that really interesting. Yeah, not a lot of bugs at all. But lots of birds, lots of birds, because think they can travel, right? These islands that are so far away, they can travel there and then repopulate. So, yeah, that was very interesting to me.
Water. Do they have water?
Do they have water? Fresh water? Yeah, they have fresh water. Drinkable water, a little bit questionable. A lot of things that we drank had to be through filtered systems. But yeah, there's fresh water available. There's some bays for like the flamingos and birds to drink from. But yeah.
You started the conference stating how both the amount of airplanes and cargo boats, how much they were hurting the environment. How do you go around that and yet foster,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's an important question. She was asking, with all the airplanes coming in, cruise lines, all these emissions that are happening, how do we combat that? And mainly it is that sustainable agriculture. They're doing a lot of new study actually in the Galápagos of letting like free range cows go around and fertilizing the ground and seeing how many cows we need to combat different carbon emissions. But again, it's like our big question was it worth it, right? That net positive, net negative that my professor asked at the beginning on the plane, and then again as my final exam. I said net positive, just because I'm kind of in this field. I'm going to use this to spread the word to people like you and raise awareness, but I think it depends on the individual. But that's a great question. We're still figuring that out for sure. Yeah. It was 2 flights. We flew out of Fort Lauderdale. Oh gosh, I'm terrible at flight information. It was probably like 12 hours of flying, like 10 to 12 hours of flying total. But again, that's with layovers and things like that. Yeah. But
are your trips subsidized? Who pays for the
our trip? Yeah, so the way we budgeted for this trip and were able to do this was we paid a class fee as for credit, right? In the fall, we paid a class fee. And then again, this spring, we paid a class fee. But then everybody was also responsible to pay for their own flight. And then a $3,200 payment. So that $3,200 went towards IOI, which was that nonprofit over on the Galápagos. And this paid for our meals, our board, our stay, things of that nature. And also, I don't know how they made it so honestly cheap for us, because I think it was a third of their money that we gave them, they put into the national parks. So with every time someone books through IOI, they give back to the community, which I think is very powerful and a great initiative that they take. But yeah, it was paid through us as students as well as IOI gave to the community. We flew into Santa Cruz, and then from there we took like a boat, they call it a cruise, but it's think of a dinghy boat. Took one of those over to Isabella. It was probably like a 3-hour boat ride. Yeah. So we fly into kind of like the mainland, where it's the only airport that you can really get to. Or we started in Quito, actually, in Ecuador, and then to Santa Cruz. And then we took a boat. So it was a busy 24 hours, to say the least.
How much is the cost of an egg?
The cost, I don't even want to think about the cost of all that. But it was worth it for sure. Any other questions you guys have for me?
Risk of tsunamis.
Oh, tsunamis. That's the only really risk that they have. They haven't had one in a long, long time. But again, the location kind of keeps them away from like hurricane impacts or other big things that are happening. El Nino is a big effect that's happening every few years that they get hit with. This has a very harsh effect on the iguanas specifically. But El Nino is basically, El Nina, just like kind of like 2 effects, but an increase in water temperature, a lack in nutrients for the animals. There's a big die-off of marine iguanas when this does hit. And like my professor, Dr. D'Alessandro, he went right after one of these events and he said there were just marine iguanas that passed away all over the beach. Yeah, and that's a hard sight to see. But yeah, that's the main event that really takes a toll on this place. But besides that, they're kind of cruising along on the equator. So if you want to reach out, I'd be more than happy to have RISMUS students, Rosenstiel students coming to your community or nature centers or anything of that nature. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.